from the vault, high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking Catholic. So good to be back with my good friend, Mike Walsh. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Kari. How are you?
I'm doing great, actually. Feels
great?
Like great.
Wow.
Is that grammatically correct? I always get...
I hope you're doing great.
Well, good, great. Good you can't say, right?
Great's a superlative.
All
You're
right,
doing
good.
fine. No, that's wonderful. I too am doing well today. It was a crazy weekend in the Diocese of Camden, particularly for me, but for actually
crazy in a good way, though.
Yes, ultimately crazy in a good way, but we were live streaming two events. One, the diaconate ordination, which we're going to talk about with some of our newly minted permanent deacons. And then we also had the diocesan Hispanic celebration this past weekend.
That's great.
And for me, we've talked about live streaming a lot on this podcast, but it was the first time the diaconate celebration the diocesan Hispanic celebration was the first time we didn't have our normal photographer there, our videographer. So myself and our beloved co-host, Mary McCusker, had to do it all by ourselves for the first time we ever did. And we did it with rented equipment because he had to take his equipment with him too. So I will say that as a perfectionist like myself, I was very stressed out. But it was a beautiful time, and it worked out well.
Kudos to you. You made it through.
Thank you very much. So it was a great weekend in the Diocese of Camden on multi fronts, and it was great that we were actually able to have the limited in person as well.
Yeah, it's so nice. I know. We're going to get into the diaconate ordination, really with our guest today, but I got to watch it. Usually I would be there. I like to be there. I was going to pull my, card.
Your Talking Catholic card?
My Talking Catholic card. Say, give me a seat. I know it's limited. But I had a prior engagement as well with a family. So the whole way to North Jersey, I was watching the live stream of it, and it looked beautiful. So it was. Great job. I did not get to watch Sunday's live stream because I was live streaming First Masses, which we'll talk about as well.
Yes.
But it was really beautiful. And for those that did get to watch either event, the Diocese does a great job with the live streams, and it's been a blessing during these times for the limited capacity.
That and of course, in the Diocese, we keep those things up as recorded episodes, so people can go to all of the Diocese of Camden Facebook, YouTube, Twitter accounts and find exactly what we're talking about today, particularly with the diaconate ordination. And I'll just say before we introduce our guest that this diaconate ordination was particularly impressive for me because we ordained 12 men.
Yes.
It was just
it's like the 12 apostles. That's all I kept thinking.
Exactly. It's and just seeing them lined up across the front of the church was just it was so heartening.
Yes.
It really made me very happy. And as you know, I'm very rarely happy.
I do know that. Was that the largest ordained class? Do you know? Or
to the best of my knowledge, it is. At least in many years. But
maybe one of the early classes was larger. But
nice. All right. So you guys made history here
I think so. That's certainly. It actually reminded me. It was so wonderful that it reminded me of what it must have been like. We know that there's a priest shortage going on right now, and our seminary classes are not as large as they used to be. But I've seen a lot of the historical photos, it would be so many men being ordained. It reminded me of that. So,
and maybe for a little foreshadowing of what's to come. Maybe there's going to be days where we go back to those large ordinations.
I hope so. I think the largest one I'll be a part of is upcoming this year, where we'll, God willing, ordain 3 priests.
That's
and
right.
I'm really looking forward to that. So anyway, enough of us. Whom do we have with us today, Kari?
We have with us some of those 12 men that we just talked about that were newly ordained this past Saturday from the ordination class. So I'm going to let them each introduce themselves. There's 3 of these new deacons with us.
Okay. Deacon Joseph Janocha from Our Lady of Peace Parish.
Deacon Charlie Dillan from Our Lady of Peace Parish.
And Deacon Toby from St. Peter and Paul Parish.
All right, nice.
Yeah.
Well, you know what parish I'm from.
Yeah, Our Lady of Peace Parish.
So I pulled 2 of my guys because easily accessible to be able to just text them and say, hey, you want to come do this? And of course, Toby and I go back. Knew them actually before my 2 parishioners knew Toby. Prior to that, from my youth ministry days at St. Bridget's, we hooked up. And you were doing youth ministry at St. Peter and Paul at the time.
I was for about 3 or 4 years there, yes.
Yeah, so great to reconnect with you, Toby, and congratulations to all of the men here on your ordination. We're going to talk a lot about how that was for you and your journey through this diaconate program. So Mike's always good about going back to where he wants to start. I always try to start it. I'm like, how was the ordination? No, let's go back. So I'm going to let Mike take us back to where our good starting point will be.
Well, when we talk about the recently ordained, and we've had a couple people. We've been blessed actually to have quite a few talk to quite a few people the day after their ordinations, or after the weekend of their ordinations. So one of the things that I do want to talk to each of you about. Maybe we'll start with Toby. The diaconate. I think a lot of people have some confusion about what the diaconate is. So Toby, from your perspective, the actual order, how do you describe it to people?
Well, I would just simply describe it as a servant. I mean, I am there to serve. Yeah. Visually, the easiest place you're going to see me serve is at the masses. However, that's not where a majority of our work will be done. Our work is going to be done out with the people. Jesus said, "Get the smell of the sheep on you," and that's what we plan on doing. Yeah. Since we started with you, what brought you to the diaconate to consider this
the
path?
calling?
Yeah.
Actually, it goes back to my youth ministry days.
Really?
My oldest daughter, who's now 22, when she was in CCD class, would come home with questions, and I would say, "I don't know, your mom's a cradle Catholic, go ask her." And I had gone through RCIA, and finally my wife called me out and said, "That's your job to answer those questions as much as it is mine." And I was like, "Oh, well, I better start studying and learning." And I got involved with Vacation Bible School, and I joined a Bible study group. And at both of those places, I had people come up to me and say, "You ever consider the diaconate? You'd be really good." And I would laugh and be like, you got the wrong person. But as things went on, I took advantage of the education that they offered through the diocese. I was able to go on and get a master's degree in theology from Georgian Court, in part because of the diocese while I was doing the youth ministry stuff. And, people just continue to approach me in very subtle ways and appreciate what I was doing and tell me to continue that journey. And when I was going to the Georgian Court classes, I was blessed to have two deacons in those classes with me. And I picked their brains and asked them a lot of questions. And Jim Hogan was one of them. And he had told me, you're a police officer. Why don't you, wait till you retire and then go into the diaconate stuff, because it's a lot of work. And I thought about what he had said, and God was pulling me and saying, "No, I want you now to do this." So I started the process, and thanks be to God, it all worked out.
That's wonderful. It's funny. But this ordination class in general, but I've noticed it's something that I've met a number of deacons over my time in the diocese now, where I've noticed there seems to be a connection between the police force and deacons. And it seems an unusually high number of policemen who seem very called to this line of service. And I always wondered, is that sort of married together a little bit?
In my opinion, I think so. I think it is service oriented. So police officers are service oriented. Several of my classmates and other deacons I've met over the years are teachers and educators, which are servants of the community, have military backgrounds. And that they're servants of the community as well. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah.
So since we got to hear from Toby, I would love to hear each men's
Let's go down the line.
journey. Yeah, so let's hear from Deacon Charlie.
Sure. Well, I guess the first time that I was approached about being a deacon was probably close to 35, maybe 40 years ago. I'm the oldest one in our group to be ordained. And I was approached by several people that I worked with. I worked for the Postal Service. I spent 5 years in the Air Force, talking about military service,
yeah.
and then 30 years with the Postal Service, also a service organization. And I worked in several different areas, all of them, of course, dealing with different types of service. Sometimes when I first started out as a carrier, you're meeting the people on the street every day, delivering their mail. Then I worked up into management on the operations side. And then I worked in human resources. And again, meeting people at different points in their lives, hiring them for jobs, and also doing retirement counseling for, those who were at retirement age. And then the last few years I worked in finance, which also then was a service to the post offices. I was there to answer their questions about their finances and all. So I think you're onto something as far as the service connection, whether it's police or those that work in a service industry. I retired in beginning of 2009. And at that time, was more involved here in the parish. I mean, for many years, of course, this has been really my home parish since I became Catholic, which was a week before Marion and I were married. And this has been my parish ever since then. But, initially we weren't too involved. But at that point, by the time I retired, I had a lot more time on my hands. Like I said, the first time I was approached about it was when I was working in Postal Service, and we had young kids, and I said, I don't have time, But looking back on it, I could have made the time because I was going to night school, but that would have been a conflict. I would have had to give up the night school, to at least the way the program is established now with classes on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. That would have conflicted with, my night school. But anyway, the call just kept coming. People kept approaching me. I think you'd make a good deacon. And even, like I said, even in retirement. And I had some people here in the parish that kept pushing me. And then I had, a couple instances where I had some revelations, if you will, dreams, things that happen, experiences with some of the deacons here and other deacons throughout the diocese that I met. Deacon Chris Nichols was instrumental. He's one of them, that influenced me a lot, along with our deacons here in our parish. They're all phenomenal. And so I finally said yes. Like I said, later on, than most of the other guys in the class.
But it's God's perfect timing for you.
Exactly. He calls us all, and he keeps calling us until he gets us.
That is very
beautiful.
true.
Thanks, Charlie. And then we're going to have Joe's story.
Okay. Well, Joe is neither in a service industry, nor did anybody ever say to Joe, I think you'd be a good deacon.
There's always one, oddball.
There's always one oddball out there. Right now, I worked my entire career pretty much in the utility industry, which is somewhat of a service industry. And I kind of entered it with the idea that I just thought it would be entered the utility business because I just thought, okay, this is an industry where we're providing a vital service, and I just thought it'd be interesting and neat to be a part of that. So maybe there is a small connection. But nobody ever told me I'd make a good deacon, except for one guy who basically I answered his call, and he thinks I'm going to be a good deacon. So, and that's Jesus himself, right? So here I am. I can't pinpoint any particular instance where like a light bulb went off in my head or the St. Paul lightning bolt knocking me off my horse. But it was just a lot of little things here and there that were coming around. I mean, I think like Charlie, maybe not 35, 40 years ago, but maybe about 10, 15 years ago, especially when I had first moved to Sicklerville and started going to St. John Newman Parish. That was at the time. And I saw, that was the first time I had really ever seen deacons. I grew up in North Jersey, in a traditional Polish Roman Catholic parish, and all there were was just priests. So I saw these guys, and I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. I think I could do that. I think that'd be something where I would be successful at. So I kind of had that in the back of my head, And then it just sort of, it lingered there, and it never really, I didn't really act on it. But it never really went away either. So I did a little bit of my own research about it. About 8 years ago now, I started helping my daughter out with CCD. And I literally mean that. She was the teacher. I was the classroom aide. And then I was promoted to hall monitor. And
I remember seeing you here. You did a great job monitoring the halls, by the way.
I monitored the halls with a deacon, Al LaMonica. And I got to know Al. And I got to see what he was doing. He was heading up CCD at the time. And once again, it started a little, I won't say bugging me here, but it started a fire inside. And it's like, okay, I see what Al's doing. I could do this too. This looks like a really wonderful thing to be part of. So I, over a course of several months, I discerning, going over it. And I said, one day I said, the one Sunday I said that, the week before, I said, I'm going to go talk to Al and I'm going to ask him, how do you get into the program? Well, lo and behold, before I even got to CCD that day, there was a little advertisement in the bulletin. Are you interested in being a deacon? I'm like, yeah.
Wow.
And so I'm like, okay, well, there's something going on there for sure. And so it was they had the orientation night or the introduction
night. Was that here?
It was here. It was actually in this room.
We were here too. My husband Phil came to it.
Yes,
yep.
You're right.
And he came
and Phil was here.
And he falls into the category of, we have young kids.
Exactly.
I'm going to wait till I'm retired. And everyone's like, we need young deacons though. And it is difficult. We have a 2.5-year-old right now, but I think yesterday seeing both of your masses, continued a little spark for him. But back to you, Joe. I remember that night, though. I remember being here with Annette and you and together.
I walked through the door back there that nobody can see, but we all can see it. And I was greeted by Deacon Jim Holman, who I knew, but really didn't, know all that well. I mean, I know him a lot better now. His face lit up. He put, the Jim Holman smile, and he's like, "Oh, I am so glad you came."
No.
I'm like, "Okay, all right," and that was kind of it. That was all I needed to hear, because that was the closest thing that anybody ever said. Hey, Joe, I think you make a good deacon. It was like, I'm glad you came, and boy, I'm glad I came and I stayed and went through the process because it has been, to say it's life-changing is just like a significant understatement. And I think I speak for all my brothers here and the ones that are the other 9 guys that lined up. I think, we are certainly not the same men that we were when we started.
I would agree with that.
I would absolutely agree with that.
You just alluded to something I like to ask about, the process. Now, I too was approached once about becoming a deacon and gave it some serious thought. And then I'm
impressed with you, Mike.
I did. And then I met a bunch of deacons, and then I started to work for the diocese, and I see what the deacons really have to do, and I was like, "That's too hard. I'm not doing that. Forget it."
At least you thought about it.
But
I
gave
maybe prayed about it a little bit.
I definitely thought about it. I probably prayed about it. But I talked to a lot of people about it, and there is some truth that it's you really do need the calling, and it isn't for everybody. But
sure.
But let's talk about the process a little bit, because it's one of the things that, I'll be honest, kind of scared me off at the very beginning. It is a laborious process.
Yes.
It's no small thing. It's not, you don't roll up and 6 months you're a deacon. It's a 6+ year process.
5.5 years for us.
5.5 for you guys? Okay.
And they're looking to try to trim it down, but I don't know how.
It does feel onerous sometimes until I realize just what's required to be a deacon. You suddenly realize, well, this actually kind of makes sense. So, Deacon Charlie, can you talk a little bit about what that process was, as someone who certainly was shaking your head and going, boy, was it tough.
Well, as I previously mentioned, I was the oldest one of the group. And for me to hear, as we're going through the aspirancy phase, which is the first 6 months, where they kind of give you a taste of everything that you're going to get into. The first thing that I dreaded was, I got to do papers. Oh. And I'm thinking, I haven't had to write a paper. I mean, I had done some briefs over the years with the Postal Service, but it's not the same thing as writing a reflection paper or even a research paper, which I hadn't done for 40 years. Yeah. And that was, for me, was the scariest thing. I'm thinking, I can't do this. You know? But then I got to thinking about it, and I thought, I think I still feel that calling. And I thought about, well, how did you get through night school? Yeah. And, I thought, okay, I can still use some of those same tools. They've been updated. Because I used to ask my professors, is it okay if I record, your classes, to help me out with notes and all? And they all were very gracious in saying, yeah, sure. So I asked the same question for the diaconate. And again, they all said, yeah, sure, no problem. And as it turned out, it was a great gift to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. Because, and Toby has even mentioned it to me several times afterwards, that even Joe, we had a website that I would share those recordings with people who couldn't make the classes. Yeah. And it would help them, with their notes and all. And I thought, But like you say, you talk about the process and scary. It was really scary for me. And especially then, one of the first classes we had was with Deacon Joe Siemens. Mm-hmm. He brought me into, the 21st century really quickly with the way he wanted his class to be run. We had lectures, and then we had to write some sentences or, reflections, if you will, quick things, observations about what happened, during that lecture. And then we all had to critique each other each week. We had to give some kind of feedback. And again, using updated technology. But it was great. And again, I saved every one of those. I still have them. And because I thought early on, I said, there might be material here that we need for homilies in the future.
Smart. Very smart.
But again, at the very beginning, I'm like, I could see that being
overwhelming.
Yeah. Talk about sweating, and needing to pray and discern whether or not it's...
The work has a lot to do with it. People, it's not just, am I spiritually called? Am I mentally called? Am I prepared? I obviously have proven repeatedly that I'm not. Deacon Toby. So how is the actual formation process sort of broken up? What are those first? What's year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, or 5?
Well, they tried to break it down and make it very similar to an academic program. We had the first 6 months of aspirancy, which was basically a reflection period and the brief overview of what the academics were going to be. And the other part of that, which I don't think anybody touched on, was we had to go through a lot of background checks. Mm-hmm. We had to go through a ton of psychological exams, more so than I needed to get into the police academy. Mm-hmm. Wow. And we needed to pass all those as well. And then it was... basically, again, very academic calendar. We had one class on Tuesdays and one on Thursdays, and it went for 14 to 16 weeks. And then we'd have a brief break, and we'd go back and do the same thing all over again. And we had, public speaking, we had Old Testament, we had New Testament, we had homiletics 1 and 2, a lot of different Christology, a lot of different very relevant topics. Mm-hmm. And to touch on what you were saying is the academics were kind of intimidating. I kind of knew I was interested in becoming a deacon, so when I had the opportunity to go back to school through the diocese, I thought that was going to be a nice kind of warm up for me, and it was, but it was still challenging. And, like Deacon Charlie was saying, those recordings were lifesavers. The conversations that we had, the brotherhood and bonds that we formed were lifesavers. I don't think I personally couldn't have gotten through the program without that. It was challenging. Mm-hmm. I still had small kids. I do rotating shift work. At the time I was going through points in my career where I was on call for work. And so there were times where I couldn't be at class and, would not have made it through if it wasn't for my other brothers in the class. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Do they, with knowing most of the men that are in it are probably working, regular jobs and because the diaconate is, you don't get paid for it, right? It's just like total service,
yes.
right? So this is you still have a lot of men have their full-time job and families. How much leniency is there, leeway is there with, the schedule flexibility? I mean, could you be dipping out of class here and there, or is it you're expected to be there pretty much 100% of the time? How does that work?
I mean, there was a lot less flexibility than I thought there would be.
Okay.
I think from the outset, I mean, it wasn't ridiculous, but from the outset, you got the message like this, you made this commitment, and there's some high expectations of you, and we'll work with you when it's absolutely necessary, but you can't be just deciding that, well, man, 5 Tuesdays out of 6 I can't make it because this, that, or the other thing. And while I think we were all blessed in that, I don't think anybody in our class, excuse me, where it ever came to that for anybody. I think we all knew we had to kind of toe the line, and it really had to be something extraordinary for you not to be at class.
And it was 2 nights and a weekend?
2 nights and 1 weekend, 1 Saturday a month.
Right.
2 nights a week and then 1 Saturday
a month.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then with that, what role did your wives play in that? Because I believe, like talking to Charlie, your wife Maren, I know she would say sometimes, "Oh, I'm going to class with Charlie." How? Because as a woman, it's always nice to hear how you support your husbands in their endeavors, and I always found that very interesting that she would be going with you in a very supportive, beautiful way.
Well, she loved going to the classes. The wives are encouraged, to come to the classes if they can.
All of them, the Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays.
Yep. Whatever they're available to come to. And Marion really enjoyed it. And she says, I learned things there that maybe I learned in Catholic school, but I have forgotten. She said it kind of renewed her catechetical teaching and all. She says you really got a lot out of it, really enjoyed every one of the classes that she was able to attend. And she was able to attend more early on in the process than towards the end, because now we're involved a lot with, watching our grandchildren. And they can be a handful, and they can wear you out during the day. But she enjoyed the process, wholeheartedly, would participate. They're encouraged to participate in the classes as well.
Oh, well, so answer
in the
questions
discussion,
and all?
absolutely
That's
ask
really
questions, maybe answer questions all if they want. Of course, they didn't have to write any of the papers or take any of the tests, that we did.
But they didn't get ordained either, so
exactly. But
but that's nice. That support is really nice to see,
and kind of required as well, right? I mean, you need to have your wife's permission and encouragement to do this.
Absolutely.
Oh yes, they need to write several letters on our behalf,
Yeah.
making sure that it was.
We did
understood
actually
that
have
it was okay.
One of the deacons' wife who she participated in every class because she was working towards her catechetical certificate from the diocese. So she was there for every academic class, with her husband. That was Michelle Dooley, Deacon Bob Dooley's wife. So it was very nice, for her to be there. Yeah.
I'm interested to know: did you start with the 12 and end with the 12, or were there some men that discerned out along the way?
We had we initially started, I think, with 13.
With 13.
Right.
With our group?
With our group.
Yeah.
Yes.
That sounds right.
And we lost 3.
3. We lost one guy right in aspirancy.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Anthony.
Yeah.
And then you picked up some.
And then we picked up there was a class behind us that had started. I believe started with 5 or 6
And they were
guys.
2 years, I believe, behind us.
They were 2 years behind us. And then during that period of time, two of those guys dropped out. So now they had a class of 3, which was just not, it
not conducive.
It wasn't.
To
it was untenable to kind of keep that going. So they were given the opportunity to join our class. Otherwise, they would have had to waited for the next formation class, which thank God they didn't, because that class quite started yet. So they came on board with us. So we were, at that point, we were down at 10. We got those guys, so we were back up to 13. Those guys, with the, with the academics that we had to go through, they had even another step further because they had to catch up for 2 years. Mm-hmm. So they were going over the summer as well.
Oh, wow.
So they were doing like a trimester kind of of an approach. But they caught up with us, and then we had one guy who wasn't able to get ordained just yet with the class. That's how we were down to 12. And so, I think as classes go, we've been probably one of the most steady, if you will. I mean, we have, we're pretty much the same core group of guys for the whole thing, which was a lot. You talked to the classes before us, and a lot of them are, really surprised that
that's great
we
to
made
hear.
it that far.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did.
Yeah, I was curious. When I heard the number 12, I was like, wow, did they start off with like 15 or what? But that makes sense how the classes combined and merged along the way.
And you met at your academic work was done at the Diaconate Center in Vineland?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Initially, we started off in Paulsboro, and we were meeting on Saturdays for our aspirancy period for the first 6 months. And then at that point, they had acquired the Diaconate Center in Vineland, and then that's when we moved, and they changed the format to the Tuesday, Thursday, and one Saturday a month. Before that, it was every Saturday.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that was when I looked into it. It was every Saturday, and I will admit that did scare me off a little bit.
That is intimidating.
But we've talked about that, about the intimidation. But the truth of the matter is, when you consider the importance of the deacon in the modern Catholic Church, and everything that they need to know about, you're not only you have to understand the liturgy of the Word, you have to understand the liturgy of the Eucharist, and then you have to understand all the service opportunities. So at this point, now that you've been ordained, have you received assignments? Like, do you know what you'll be doing in your diaconate life yet, or are you still waiting to hear?
Within our parishes where we are right now, I know I have got one I'm doing a committal for a funeral this Saturday.
I'm doing.
Wow.
I'm probably doing the vigil service for that same person.
Yeah.
Put you right to work here. That's great.
And I know one of our other deacons who was ordained. He had his first Mass yesterday, followed immediately by his first baptism.
Wow!
So they're putting us right to work. But as far as what our permanent assignments will be, we don't know where we're going to be assigned yet. So
okay. So let's talk about the ordination a little bit. That's always a day of great joy within the diocese, and I know it's always a day of great joy for the people who are actually being ordained. When you woke up that morning or in the days ahead, were the butterflies hitting? Were you getting a sense of finality to it? Like you're finally coming to the end of this process or was it just, man, I've been wanting to wear that dalmatic for so long? Like what were some of the thoughts going through your minds?
For me, it was really bittersweet. We're all 12 of us, or 13 of us in academic studies, but 12 of us that were ordained, we're all very different. But we all respected each other, and I love them like brothers. And I'm going to miss not being there with them on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Yeah. That was a little sad for me, I'll be honest. But I'm very excited. But, there were definitely butterflies there about what the future has for all of us. And I know we'll remain close, and we can always reach out to each other. Mm-hmm. And so a little bit of both.
How about you, Deacon Charlie?
Well, I would agree with that. I probably was a little more nervous than some of the other guys because Friday night at rehearsal, they told us that some of us were actually going to be at the altar serving. And as it turns out, I was the deacon of the Eucharist, and the only thing I could think about was making sure I didn't knock the bishop out with a thurible when I go to incense him. Yeah. And it was a little. I was nervous, but when we all got together Saturday morning for prayer, over in the hall next to Our Lady of Lourdes. And we actually met in the room that they have up on the stage. And I don't know if you know what they call it.
The upper
It's
room,
called
right?
the upper room.
Mm-hmm.
And the thought that the 12 of us in the upper room, and we're all praying, and as we're going through the rosary, I happen to look down. Right next to me on the floor was a picture of Pope St. John Paul II. And I saw that, and then I saw a picture of Our Lady on the wall, and I thought, everything's going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice.
And it was. Yeah, it turned out. It was. It's been a beautiful, beautiful weekend.
Yeah. Probably still up on cloud 9.
Yeah.
You haven't come down yet.
Right.
How about for you, Deacon Joe? What was the day like?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember feeling butterflies necessarily. I don't remember feeling nervous. I mean, excited and joyful, certainly. Maybe just a side of saying, boy, I can't wait to get to that Dalmatic conference. I'm not going to lie.
You look good in it, too.
Yeah.
You look good.
Right. What was that? Was that Eddie Murphy line with this? But I make this look good. So, but yeah, it was definitely. It was just the sense of, I still can't believe this. I can't believe that it's finally it's come to this, and and after the bishop said the prayers, we're all kneeling along the on that first step, and I'm just thinking, when we get up from this, we're ordained, and I'm like, oh my gosh, and it was just marvelous.
And when he laid hands on us,
Yeah.
On our heads, as each one went up, it was just one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It truly was.
It is absolutely my favorite thing to cover from my perspective, because the entire ceremony of an ordination and the reverence and the fact that you're making yourselves obedient to the bishop, but also obedient to a God, and basically making a vow. The only similar vow like it is, and each of you have made it in the past, is the vow of marriage. But I mean, you've made a giant commitment, which is no doubt, like what Deacon Joe was saying, is why the process is as strict as it is. Because, I mean, this is not something you can go into, without full commitment. You really have to be, because you guys are now members of the clergy for the entirety of your lives, which is a beautiful thing. I absolutely love that. Now, as we're talking to these deacons, Kari, are you just how much are you going to be pushing Phil to? I mean, not pushing. I mean, encouraging Phil to. To consider it.
Knowing Deacon Joe and Deacon Charlie well, and seeing them go through that process, and after hearing it, I know the commitment is a lot. So I'm going to give it a little time. I know right now, Thursdays I work, and he's on dad duty, so there's no way unless that day changes. But God will have His way if He's called. It's funny because I'll say this on air. The man I dated before my husband, who is Phil, the man I dated before that, broke up with me because he wanted to discern priesthood, and I said, okay, well, I can't argue with that one, and understood God's will in that, and look back and I see God's will in all. He did not become a priest, but I do see God's will in us breaking off, because then I met my husband Phil, who is my husband now, right? Obviously, and the first thing I said to him when we started dating was, "You're not thinking about becoming a priest or anything, are you?" And he said, "No, but deacon I am," and he said that right from the start. So I always remind him that. Every once in a while, gently remind him of that he mentioned that, which is what brought us here that day 9 years ago, how many years ago it was, is because he always had that in the back of his mind, probably still does, and we'll see what God uses that for, and what, where it brings it.
We'll see if we can't add a little fertilizer to that seed.
Yeah. Well, you guys know him well. You can chat it up with him for sure.
Deacon Sam has small children.
Yeah.
Yes, he does.
He's got three small children.
Was he the young one the youngest one that got ordained?
He was the guy who was lined up with
43.
me, and he kept trying to run away before, we were supposed to bow and all that stuff.
So my husband's 41, so he's right there. Yeah.
I think.
Well, and Sam and his wife, they were all three of their children have been born during our
Amazing.
formation.
Wow. Yeah. Amazing.
So
That's a great witness.
That was actually the thing that I noticed just looking at all the men, because I know some of the then deacon candidates, but I didn't know everybody. And the thing that actually kind of stood out to me was just what a youthful group it is. Now, I say that sort of tongue in cheek.
Tell that you're youthful.
But 40s and 50s seemed to me to be the predominant. I guess 50s was probably the predominant age group, which is perfect. Which is a great age for diaconate. Now, I do know 40-year-old deacons and things like that, but the fact that it is an opportunity to try something new slightly later in life, and if you have a calling to that, it's something that I don't think a lot of men necessarily, and actually I know this for a fact because I was on the Man Up committee for many years, our men's spirituality conference. And the reason why we created that conference was because we knew that men had difficulty sort of expressing and embracing their spirituality, whereas the diaconate process is, that's required, really. And so it's fervent ground. I am hoping that people will listen to this podcast and certainly speak to you in your private lives and be encouraged to consider it. It seems to me like the three of you are all things being considered and the trials and tribulations that took you to here seem awfully happy. Day 2 of being deacons, day 3, I guess, being deacons, and you have nothing but glows about you and smiles on your face, and I think that's wonderful. Would you encourage people, men, to become deacons?
I absolutely, I would.
What kind of question is that? Do you think they're going to say no?
Well, look at me. I talk people out of being a PR guy all the time, but
you don't count.
What's important is the support of your community and your family. But if you have that community support, I think I speak for both of us here, and probably all the guys. If you have that support from your community, it makes it, I don't want to say easier.
Streamlines it, makes it better, makes it quick.
Yeah, better.
Support it. Just support it. You're supported.
I think
go ahead.
The other thing with that is, especially in today's modern society, Jesus is not going to put a billboard out on 42 and say, "I'm calling you."
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people want or expect. But again, if you're talking to the three of us today or any of the 12 of us that were ordained the other day, it didn't happen like that. And it didn't happen overnight. It was a conversation with somebody here, a kind word from a priest or a deacon over there, a powerful experience at church, or reading the Bible or something like that, where you felt something. And it wasn't just one thing. It was lots of little things. And I think, like you had said, men have difficulty being in tune with that aspect of their lives. But I think it's important to be open to that, because I'm sure God is calling many men to this service, and they just need to open their eyes and their hearts.
Very true. Very true.
And it is a scary opportunity. This is how my brain works, but one of the things it has also kept me from doing it is there's a certain fear aspect to it, because you are responsible now for quite a bit of people's futures. In addition to all of your service work that you'll be performing baptisms, you'll be performing marriages, all of these sacramental elements of your life that people's spirituality is really focused on, and you'll be a minister of the Eucharist. There's something to be said for all of these elements of your spiritual life. Like you had said earlier, Deacon Charlie, a certain trepidation about being the deacon of the Eucharist at the ordination mass. How long? What do you think? How long do you think it's going to take you to get comfortable with celebrating masses with the bishops or with the priests?
Well,
or taking part in the mass, not celebrating the mass.
Here in this parish, they've made us very comfortable. I'll speak for me. I think for you as well, Joe.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean,
They've made us very comfortable. In fact, I served this morning with Father Maz at daily mass, and I was a little nervous just because it was, the first time at daily mass, but as acolytes, we were allowed to be, right there as much as we could. Lockdown changed everybody's lives, of course, but I feel very comfortable at Mass. The things that I'm less comfortable with are those other liturgy celebrations like baptism or wedding or funerals. And it's just because we haven't done them. It's like anything else. You keep getting on the bike and riding it, you get better at it.
You both looked very comfortable yesterday. I actually was curious to hear in our last 10 minutes that we have how your first masses went. Now, of course, I witnessed Deacon Joe, Deacon Charlie's, and Deacon Toby. I'd love to hear about yours as well, but our viewers haven't seen them, so we'll let you each go around and share a little bit about what that was like serving for real the first time. I don't know how else to put it, because you've been made comfortable with as acolytes, but now you're in that particular role as the deacon and then also preaching as well. So,
well, I was, I wasn't nervous. I didn't think I did. I looked briefly at the video you showed me at the very beginning, and I still have to work on the scowl, get it off my face, because it wasn't reflective of what was going on inside here.
I think you
right? So but
not nervous.
No, it was, it was wonderful. Preaching, I know I did a fairly short homily, but there were. I know I have a tendency sometimes when I preach, especially in practice, I can kind of get tangled up in my words a little bit, or I might start down a path and not, really recover from the path that I went down, because that really wasn't what I was planning on. But yesterday, I didn't feel that happen. So I think I did. I think I did the Lord a good service with that.
And you had just very little notes, right? It didn't look like you were reading.
No, I didn't read.
How's your approach? You just some bullet points, maybe. I thought that was. I enjoyed.
I had it kind of written out, and I've been doing that. Even in formation, people have said, like, the when we critique each other, the ones where I think I did the best were when I went out without any notes. So try to keep that up. But but I will tell you, and I'm sure these guys and everybody else, probably the most profound thing for me at the time was at the end of the Eucharistic prayer, the first time where you're holding the cup and Father's pronouncing the doxology, and it's like, yeah, there's really stuff. You're looking over it, and it's like, it's not empty. Because we've done it in practicums over and over and over again, and, make sure you hold it at the right height and all that. But just being there. The other thing that struck me, and we were told this, during class, is like, you are like, you're right by the altar, and, you're so close you can read the prayers in the missal from where you're standing, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm right here. And yeah, it was unbelievable. It was, a humbling experience for sure.
Beautiful, beautiful place to be right there at the altar.
Well, mine, for my first Mass, I was at Joe's Mass as well. We both served at each other's Masses, which was nice. It was beautiful. Really nice. It was nice to be able to do that. And I was nervous, but the only thing I really was nervous about was the delivery of my homily, because the way I delivered it is not the way I normally do.
Really?
And because I don't ever, all through homiletics and public speaking, never, ever used, maybe once in a while I had a little note card with notes. But yesterday's homily, I actually typed it out because for me, the message that I was trying to get across, I wanted to make sure that, I didn't miss anything. So I had typed it all out, larger font because, the eyes are getting a little worn these years, but I did that. And so I was really nervous about how that was going to come across, because I really didn't want it to come across that I was reading it, even though there, I had some quotes in there that I did have to read, because I wanted to make sure that they were accurate. But normally, a homily for me is not that way. I'm not going to have a lot of notes there. It's more.
Did you preach this morning?
I did not this morning.
No, okay.
No.
So you haven't gotten there yet. And I have to say, Deacon Charlie, it didn't seem like I could tell you were reading because of the way you delivered it, and I know having conversations with you over and over. But at the same time, it didn't seem like like you were reading it. It actually felt very a natural delivery to it. So don't overthink it at all. It was it was an amazing message that you needed to give, and you gave it well, very well.
Well, thank you. Well, rehearsal helped.
Yeah, it always does.
But there were I did watch the Mass last night. Marion and I watched, actually, we looked at both of them. And I was critiquing myself, and like, Joe, got to get rid of the scowl. I said that to Marion at one time. I says, one of the things that I need to improve on is making sure that I smile once in a while when I'm up there on the altar. Because it's a beautiful thing. And I don't, you don't want people to not be joyous.
That's absolutely right.
And I know one of the times that I always would smile is when I'm giving the Eucharist. But now with the masks, people can't see that, so they don't see that joy that I have in administering the Eucharist. So I've got to find another way to present that, and it has to be, smiling when I'm at the altar, when you're lifting the chalice at the end of the Eucharistic prayer, which I had the opportunity to do, through the grace of God, thank you, with Bishop Sullivan on Saturday, and then with Father Maz on Sunday. I wasn't smiling.
And you weren't smiling on Saturday.
I was not smiling on Saturday at that point.
That's right. We're going to chalk it up to nerves. It was nerves.
Yeah,
Just chalk it up to that.
if you look at some of the other pictures during the ordination, I had a smile, from here to Texas.
Yeah.
Because it was so joyous. But getting back to yesterday's Mass, there were some things that I needed to improve on, like movement. A couple times I stopped dead in my tracks, like, which way am I supposed to go? Am I going this way around the altar, the other way around the altar? And I just have to just go. People in the congregation don't really care about that, as long as it looks fluid and smooth and reverent. And that's the thing. You were
tripping me up a little bit, though. I was transitioning my cameras. I'm like, is Charlie going to go or not? Ready to go?
Exactly,
so, let's go on to Toby. How was your first Mass, Deacon Toby?
Well, I did not do a homily yet. I will be doing that this coming Sunday.
Okay.
We talked briefly before we started, and I was nervous. As a police officer, as a member of the SWAT team, as a negotiator, I have a very good reputation of not getting nervous with much of anything. And I did say to you earlier, my 22-year-old daughter did many, many years of competitive gymnastics, and she said to me after Mass, she said, "Dad, you look nervous. I thought I was about to get up and do a beam routine. That's how nervous you had me." And I was very nervous. Because it's a powerful moment, being up there for real for the first time, and to touch on something you had said earlier, through my line of work, I deal with people and people's lives. As deacons, we're dealing with people's spiritual lives, which is even a greater burden and responsibility. And I was nervous I was going to screw it up, Thankfully, Deacon Frank Campese was there with me to kind of MC me through the process. Father Steve, who is, I said the other day, he's as smooth as a pebble in the main river. It's nice, and he's cool and smooth and doesn't get bothered by anything. God bless the man. And Monsignor Roger, who also vested me, my former pastor, was also at my first Mass. So I had a lot of support to guide me through.
So nice.
But I was nervous, Not going to lie.
That's okay. That's to be
Good.
expected. Yeah.
If you weren't, I would have thought you were a sociopath.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. No, it was such a great mass, and we're going to wrap up now. But it was such a wonderful mass. The ordination was so wonderful, and I'm so happy that your first masses went so well, and that even if you may have some things you need to work on a little bit, but like I forget who you said it, it's just a matter of practice. As you get more used to it, everything comes more naturally. But I'm as the communications director, I'm thrilled that the three of you have accepted the call originally and took it all the way through, because, it's a wonderful thing for me to see. It buoys my spiritualness to see good things happen in the diocese.
And our diocese is blessed to have you and the other 9 men that were ordained. We're truly blessed.
And in about 6 years, we'll have Deacon Phil. So it'll be fun.
There we go. To be continued in another podcast 6 years down the road.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening, and thank you for joining us today. And we'll catch up with you again next week. Bye.
God bless.